The bell above the cafe door gave its usual tired jingle, and I looked up from the espresso machine just in time to see him step inside. Tuesdays were usually slow. The kind of slow that made my thoughts wander back to the hospital room and the machines humming around my mom's bed. The kind of slow that let worry seep into all the empty spaces. But when he walked in, something shifted, just a subtle tug in my chest, like gravity adjusting. He looked lost. Not in the literal sense, just the kind of lost that lives behind someone's eyes. Dark hair a little mussed, shoulders tense in a way that made me wonder how long he'd been carrying whatever weight sat on them. He ordered a coffee. Just a plain one. His voice was soft, like he didn't want to disturb anything, not even the air. I made it, set it down, and expected him to leave after a few sips like most people who come alone on a slow Tuesday. But instead, he chose the booth by the window, the one with the peeling leather and good late afternoon light, and sat there. And sat. And sat. 2 hours passed. Then 3. His coffee had gone stone cold, but he barely touched it. He just kept staring out the window, tapping his thumb against the mug as if waiting for an answer that refused to come. I pretended not to watch him. But I did. A lot. Finally, near closing, I walked over and tried not to sound too intrusive. "You okay?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. He blinked, as if waking up from some deep internal place. "Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to take up space." Then he smiled. A small one. A tired one. But one that made something flutter inside my chest. He stood, walked back to the counter, and asked for another coffee. This time, he drank it slowly. Really slowly. An hour slipped by, and he left without another word. I didn't think much of it, at least, that's what I told myself. But something about the quiet thoughtfulness on his face stayed with me as I swept crumbs off tables and wiped the counters down. When I finally closed up the shop and headed home through the park, the night air felt colder than usual. I wrapped my coat tighter, crossing under the dim street lamps. And stopped. There he was. The same guy. Sitting on a bench beneath a flickering light, elbows on his knees, head tilted slightly upward like he was trying to breathe in the entire sky. I hesitated. I should have kept walking. It was late, and I was exhausted, and I had a bus to catch and a mother waiting for me to bring good news, even if the only good news I ever seemed to bring home lately was that I still had my job. But something tugged at me again. So I walked over. "Hey," I said softly. "Everything okay? It's pretty late for park sitting." He looked up at me. The streetlight haloed him gently, and his eyes, deep, thoughtful, distant, held something almost fragile. "Just getting some fresh air," he said. I nodded. I didn't know him. I didn't know why I was suddenly talking to a stranger in a park at 10 p.m. But for some reason, it felt natural. We exchanged a few more words, nothing meaningful, nothing revealing, just the sort of small talk that feels heavier than it should. Then I wished him a good night and walked home, the image of him still lingering in my mind like an unfinished sentence. I didn't expect him to come back. But the next day he did. And the day after that. And the day after that. For days in a row he walked in, ordered something warm, coffee, then matcha, then coffee again, gave me a soft hi, sat at his booth, and left. No lingering stares, no flirting, nothing bold. Just a quiet presence that somehow became part of the rhythm of my days. Then came the 5th day. He didn't show up. Nor the 6th. Nor the 7th. I didn't realize how used I'd become to seeing him until the empty booth felt like a missing piece of something I hadn't admitted I was building. But when he finally walked in a week later, shoulders slumped, expression weighed down and dark, I knew something was wrong. And I knew, without understanding why, that whatever was coming next would change everything. I just didn't know how much. The bell chimed again, but this time it cut through me like a sharp inhale. I looked up, already knowing somehow that it was him. But the moment I saw his face, my heart tightened. He tried to smile. Really tried. The kind of smile someone forces when their world is collapsing and they don't want anyone to see the cracks. His eyes didn't lift the way they usually did, and the warmth he carried, quiet and understated as it was, felt dimmed, like someone had turned down a switch inside him. "Hi," he said, voice thin. I swallowed. "Hi." He ordered his usual coffee, but even that felt different. He wasn't really looking at me, more at the floor, or himself, or whatever storm was brewing behind his eyes. When I brought it to him, he lifted his face just enough for our gazes to meet. And the second our eyes locked, everything in my chest went warm and wobbly. He looked at me like he was trying to anchor himself to something. Anything. And the fact that the something was me made my cheeks grow hot. We talked a little, tiny things, the kind of small talk that somehow felt too intimate. He asked me how my day was going. I asked if he had slept at all. He laughed, soft but tired, and a strand of hair fell into his eyes. For a moment, it felt like the rest of the cafe disappeared. Then he glanced away, the light fading again. Something was eating at him. I wanted to ask. I wanted to reach across the counter and say, "You can talk to me, you know. I don't know why you chose this cafe or this booth, but I'm here." But I didn't. Because strangers don't say things like that. And cafe workers aren't supposed to pry. So instead, I gave him what I hoped was a comforting smile and handed him his drink. His fingers brushed mine, just barely, and the spark that jumped between us shouldn't have meant as much as it did. He went to his booth, tried a drink, didn't finish, and left after 20 minutes. But this time, before he stepped out the door, he came back to the counter. "Can I?" he said, then faltered. His lip quirked up, nervous. "Can I get your number?" The world stuttered. My heart went very, very still. I blinked at him, unsure if I'd heard right. People didn't just ask me for my number. My life was work, hospital visits, more work, and more worry. Romance wasn't even a concept I let myself consider anymore. But he stood there waiting, hands shoved awkwardly into his pockets, looking both earnest and terrified. And the truth slipped out before I could second-guess it. "Yeah," I whispered. "Yeah, you can." He exhaled. A real smile, small but genuine, broke through the exhaustion. We exchanged phones. My hand shook. His fingers grazed mine again. And for the first time since I'd met him, a shimmer of hope flickered just behind his eyes. From that night on, the messages flowed slow at first, light, hesitant. Then warmer. Longer. Deep. He asked about my favorite late-night snack. I asked what his favorite memory was. He told me about his childhood dog. I told him about the first time I learned how to make coffee without burning it. We grew into each other in the quiet spaces between day and night. And then, after weeks of talking, he asked if I wanted to go out. "Just a little picnic," he said. "If you'd like." If I'd like? I'd been replaying his smile in my mind for days. So yes. Yes, I liked. But the universe has a way of making sure nothing goes as smoothly as we imagine. Because the picnic, our very first date, was both awkward and perfect in all the ways that make something memorable. And neither of us knew it then, but that simple afternoon would become the beginning of a story neither of us had been ready for. A story that would pull me far deeper into his world than I ever expected. Into grief, corporate betrayal, late-night plotting, and a trust one never believed someone would place in me. But before all that, before the storm and the secrets and the danger, there was that first date. And the way he looked at me under the soft sky as if I was the one thing holding him together. I didn't expect to be this nervous over sandwiches. But there I was, standing in front of my mirror, smoothing my hair for the 5th time, trying to pretend my stomach wasn't doing somersaults. It wasn't even a real date, we'd both agreed on that. Just a picnic. Just friends hanging out. Nothing serious. Yet I changed my outfit 3 times. When I finally walked into the park, the late afternoon sun had dipped into that warm golden hue that makes everything look softer, gentler. He was already there, sitting cross-legged on a blanket with a small cooler beside him, tapping his fingers against his knee like he was trying to practice patience and failing miserably. He stood up the moment he saw me. And God, his smile. It was shy, crooked, and so genuine it made my breath catch. "Hey," he said. I wasn't sure what kind of sandwiches you liked, so I made 3 different kinds." "That's very efficient of you," I teased. He blushed. Actually blushed. I panicked. We sat down, our knees almost touching. The space between us felt charged, warm, awkward in a sweet way. Every time our hands brushed while reaching for food, my heart skipped a beat like it was trying to outrun itself. Conversation came naturally until it didn't. Silences kept slipping in, the kind that made both of us laugh nervously. But they weren't uncomfortable, just painfully obvious that neither of us knew how to act around someone we liked but weren't supposed to admit liking. We watched ducks. We argued about whether the sun looked more orange or pink. He tried to tell a joke and completely forgot the punchline halfway through. I spilled juice on my shirt and pretended not to want to scream. It was messy. Imperfect. I loved every second. When the wind picked up, blowing my hair across my face, he reached out instinctively, then stopped halfway, hand hovering near my cheek like he wasn't sure he had the right. His fingers trembled before he withdrew them, and the almost touch lingered between us longer than it should have. I pretended not to notice. He pretended he hadn't done it. By the time we packed up, my cheeks hurt from smiling. The next date happened almost by accident. He came into the café, saw I was on break, and said, "Want to grab coffee?" "Somewhere that isn't here." We walked to a small place down the block, dim lighting, mismatched chairs, indie music humming like a heartbeat. We sat closer than we had during the picnic. Close enough for our elbows to brush. Close enough to hear the soft hitch of his breath when I laughed too hard. I don't even remember what we talked about, just the warmth in my chest and the way he looked at me like every word I said mattered. He walked me home that night. And at my door, we stood silently, neither of us willing to move. "Friend date number 2, he said with a tiny smile. "Pretty successful." "Extremely," I whispered. "Still friends. Still not a real date." We were lying to ourselves and both knew it. Our third outing should have been the easiest. Bowling. Light, silly, nothing emotional. But the second we got there, something was off. He tried to hide it. He tried to joke. But his laughter was thinner, brittle around the edges. When he picked up a bowling ball, his hands shook just enough for me to notice. I hesitated for a full game before finally sitting beside him on the molded plastic seats. "You're not okay," I said softly. He froze. Then the mask slipped slowly, painfully, until the exhaustion underneath pulled him down like gravity. "My grandfather passed away," he said, voice barely above a whisper. My heart ached. "I'm so sorry." "And the company," he swallowed hard. "Everything is falling apart. Someone inside leaked confidential information to our competitors. We're losing contracts. Investors. We don't know who the mole is, but it has to be one of the top 7 executives. 7 people. 7 potential traders." He looked at me, eyes raw and defeated. I don't know what to do. I didn't think. I just reached out, placing my hand over his. Warm. Shaking. Vulnerable. "We'll figure it out," I said. "Together." He stared at me like he wasn't sure he deserved that kind of loyalty. And then something changed in his gaze, something soft, something trusting, something that made my pulse race. "I want you to help me," he whispered. "Actually help." "Me?" "Yes." He took a breath. "I want to hire you." I blinked. "Hire me? For what?" "My personal secretary." My heart stopped. Why?" "I'm not." "Because you're qualified. Because you won't abuse it. And because..." He hesitated, cheeks flushing faintly. "I trust you." My breath caught. And in that moment, sitting in a half-empty bowling alley under neon lights flickering like broken stars, I realized this was no longer just a crush or a string of accidental friend dates. This was the beginning of something dangerous. Something bound to change our lives. And I wasn't sure if I was ready. But I knew. For him, I would try. If someone had told me 2 months ago that I'd be sitting in my tiny kitchen, staring at a real employment contract from a real corporation, one owned by the very guy who'd spilled juice with me at a picnic, I would have laughed. But there it was. A sleek folder, embossed with the company logo, sitting on my table next to half-burnt toast and overdue bills. I didn't touch it. I just stared. The night he offered me the job, I barely slept. Not because I didn't want it, but because it felt wrong. Like I was taking advantage of him, of his kindness, of his pain. I had a sick mother and a desperate need for money, of course I did. But mixing that with him, with whatever was growing between us, Felt like walking across thin ice with weights strapped to my ankles. The next morning at the cafe, he showed up early, leaning on the counter with that soft, hopeful look that made my chest ache. "You didn't respond," he said, voice gentle. I don't know if I should," I admitted. "It feels like I'm benefiting from your situation. And I don't want you to think I swallowed. Using you." His expression softened instantly, like he'd been waiting for that fear. "You're not using me," he said firmly. "I need someone who isn't part of the mess. Someone who's honest. Someone I can trust." Then, quieter, someone who sees me as a person, not a paycheck. My heart squeezed so tight I could barely breathe. "And it's not pity, right?" I whispered. He shook his head. "No. You're capable. You're smart. I've watched how you work. How you handle stress. How you talk to people. And I know, without a doubt, you're the right person. Not because you're convenient, not because I like spending time with you, but because you're good." I blinked rapidly, embarrassed by how warm my face felt. "You trust me that much?" I murmured. He nodded slowly, eyes locked on mine. "More than anyone else right now." Those words hit me with the force of a confession. Not romantic, not exactly, but deeper, in a way that lodged itself inside me like a pulse. So I signed. The next day, everything changed. Walking into his corporate building felt like stepping into another universe. Tall glass walls. Polished floors reflecting fluorescent lights. People in suits moving with purpose. Phones ringing. Laptops clicking. Voices low but urgent. I felt painfully out of place. But then he appeared beside me, dressed in a fitted suit that made him look every bit the heir to a business empire, except for the softness in his eyes when he looked at me. "You ready?" he asked. "Not even a little," I whispered. He laughed quietly. "You'll do great." He introduced me to the executives, 7 faces that blended politeness with something colder. One shook my hand a little too firmly. One barely made eye contact. One smiled too widely, like it was rehearsed. I didn't trust any of them. Which, apparently, was the point. He showed me my desk right outside his office. Sleek computer. Organized workspace. A plant I'm pretty sure he bought last minute because it still had the price sticker on it. "Does it feel weird?" he asked. "Yes," I said truthfully. He smiled, small, reassuring, the kind of smile that made my nerves settle. "Give it time." We began working through files, reviewing emails, assembling timelines. And slowly, piece by piece, the sabotage became clearer. One executive changed meeting schedules without informing the board. Another redirected shipments. Someone leaked prototypes. Everything pointed somewhere, but nowhere definite. During breaks, he'd lean against my desk, sipping coffee, pretending we were still just 2 awkward people trying to figure each other out. But the weight never fully left his eyes. Every night, we stayed late. Every night, I found something new, an inconsistency, a strange email, a hidden call log. And every night, he'd grow more hopeful. Until one evening, after hours of scanning old reports, I froze. "I found something," I whispered. He came beside me, close enough for our arms to touch, eyes glued to the screen. An altered document. 2 matching timestamps that shouldn't match. A signature that was forged, but not well. My heart pounded. His breath hitched. "This is it," he murmured. "This could be the key." But before he could say more, his phone buzzed. His father, the CEO, was calling a meeting. A private one. Everything in the room felt charged, electric, like we were standing on the edge of something huge. He turned to me, voice low. "Come with me. You deserve to be there." I stared at him, stunned. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "You're the reason we found this. Anne, I want you beside me." My heart thudded so loudly I wondered if he heard it. I didn't know what waited in that meeting room. I didn't know if the evidence was enough. I didn't know if confronting a traitor in a powerful company would blow up in our faces. But I knew one thing. I wasn't letting him walk into it alone. So I stood, smoothed my clothes, swallowed my fear, and stepped into the hallway with him. The truth was waiting. And so was danger. My heart was beating so loudly I swore it echoed down the hallway. The meeting room his father used for private matters was on the top floor, quiet, isolated, and heavy with an atmosphere that felt too serious for someone like me. Someone who's still worried about rent and hospital bills and whether I smelled too much like coffee grounds. He walked beside me, shoulders squared, jaw tight. Every step he took looked calculated, like he was forcing strength into his posture. I wanted to reach out and take his hand. Just for a second. Just to tell him he wasn't alone. But this wasn't the place. And I wasn't sure if I had the right. His father's secretary opened the glass doors without a word, stern, poised, someone who looked like she'd never once spilled juice on her shirt during a date. Inside, the CEO waited. He looked up from the table, an older man with a sharp stare and an air of authority that practically hummed. But his eyes softened the moment he saw his son, and then flicked to me with curiosity. "You brought someone," he noted. "She's the one who found the inconsistencies," he said, voice steady. "She's been helping me investigate." His father arched an eyebrow. "I see." I wasn't sure if that was a good thing. Then the door opened again, and the 7 executives filed in, each wearing their carefully composed masks. Polished. Professional. Some irritated to be called in after hours, some smugly confident, some unreadable. My pulse hammered. This was the room where the truth would rip itself open. The CEO began. "We have reason to believe someone among the executive board leaked confidential information to our competitors, resulting in the destabilization of our company." A heavy silence fell over the room. One of the executives scoffed lightly as if offended. Another shifted in her seat. A third adjusted his glasses with a little too much calm. Then the CEO nodded at us. "Show them." I stepped forward, hands trembling slightly, projecting the documents and timelines onto the screen. Line by line, I explained the mismatched signatures, the altered timestamps, the forged approvals. My voice wavered at first, but then steadied as I fell into the rhythm of what I'd spent days analyzing. When I finished, the room was dead silent. Then, like a crack spreading through ice, one of the executives began to sweat. His confident posture melted. His eyes darted toward the exit before he could catch himself. My breath caught. Him. He was the mole. The CEO turned sharply. "Do you have something to say?" The man's composure shattered. I didn't. This is ridiculous." "It's not," my boss, my almost something, said quietly but firmly. "It's all there. Every piece of it." "You don't understand," the executive stammered, desperation creeping into his tone. "They pressured me, they had information, they threatened." But the CEO lifted a hand, commanding silence. The truth spilled anyway. It didn't matter. The evidence was clear. Security was called. The executive was removed, shouting half-formed excuses that everyone ignored. When the room finally emptied, leaving only the 3 of us, everything inside me felt like it might collapse. The adrenaline rush had left my limbs shaky and weak. His father sat back, exhaling deeply. Then he looked at me with an expression I had not expected. Respect. "You did impressive work," he said. "Very impressive. My son is fortunate to have someone like you assisting him." Heat rushed to my face. "Oh, I just helped however I could." He waved a dismissive hand. "Don't be modest. The credit is yours. Most of this strategy, these connections, these deductions came from you, didn't they?" My boss glanced at me and smiled softly. "Yeah, a lot of it." I could barely breathe. Then the CEO chuckled, actually chuckled, leaning back with a mischievous glint. "And you two look good together. Very natural." We both froze. Heat exploded across my cheeks. He choked on air. "Dad." The CEO laughed louder, clearly enjoying our mutual embarrassment. But then he grew serious again, steepling his fingers. "You've done this company a great service. And I reward loyalty and brilliance." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He slid a document across the table, a bonus. A substantial one. More money than I'd ever seen on paper in my life. My vision blurred for a moment. With that money, I could pay for my mother's hospital care, the tests she needed, the treatments, the medication, all the things I'd been patching together with extra shifts and exhaustion and silent fear. I swallowed hard, tears stinging my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. His father nodded once. "You earned it." My boss touched my arm gently as we left the room, not bold, just enough to steady me, enough to say I wasn't dreaming. And for the first time in months, the world felt lighter. But I didn't know yet that the moment I walked into that hospital to pay for my mother's care would change everything. Not just for her, not just for me, but for the future I didn't even realize I was building. With him. I don't think I've ever walked into the hospital without feeling like something inside me was collapsing. The antiseptic smell, the hushed murmurs, the distant beeping of machines, it all became part of a world I'd been forced to inhabit, one where fear slept under my skin. But that day felt different. For the first time, I walked through the sliding doors carrying hope. My mother was awake when I stepped into her room, her smile weak but warm. "You look tired," she teased gently. I laughed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I always look tired. It's my aesthetic." She rolled her eyes, but her gaze softened. I pulled her blanket up a little, adjusting the pillows like I always did. Except this time, I wasn't doing it with dread pressing into my ribs. I knew that today I could give her what she needed. I spoke to her doctor, hands trembling as I handed over the paperwork, the approval, the payment. The doctor's eyes widened slightly as he scanned it. "You're covered through the entire treatment," he said, almost in disbelief. "This is wonderful news." A sob built in my throat, but I swallowed it down. "Yeah," I whispered. "It is." When I told my mother, she looked at me with tear-filled eyes. How did you manage this?" I sat on the edge of her bed and took her hand gently. "I met someone," I said softly. "And I helped him with something important. They rewarded me for it." She studied me quietly, then smiled in that knowing way only mothers can. "This someone, are they special?" My face heated instantly. "Mom, please." "I'm sick, not blind," she teased. Then her voice softened again. "You deserve good things too, sweetheart." I swallowed past the tightness in my throat and leaned forward, resting my forehead against her hand. She stroked my hair gently, and for the first time in a long time, the fear that lived in my chest eased enough for me to breathe without pain. Later that evening, after making sure she had everything she needed, I stepped out into the chilly night air. The sky was deep blue, dotted with tired street lamps. My phone vibrated. It was him. "Are you done at the hospital? Do you need a ride home?" I smiled, typing quickly. "I'm okay, but thank you." A pause. Then, "Can I see you tonight? Just for a little while?" My heart fluttered. "Yeah, I'd like that." He was waiting for me outside the café where we first met, leaning against the sidewall, hands in his pockets, head tilted up toward the sky like he was thinking as deeply as ever. But when he spotted me, his entire expression softened. The shadows under his eyes looked a little lighter. He walked toward me slowly, like approaching something precious. "How did it go?" he asked gently. I told him everything, how the doctor reacted, how relieved my mother was, how surreal it all felt. And as I spoke, he listened with every part of him. His shoulders relaxed. His gaze warmed. He looked almost proud. "I'm glad," he murmured. "You deserve that peace." Silence settled between us, soft but full, like a warm blanket instead of a barrier. We stood there, facing each other under the buzzing streetlight, the world unusually quiet. Then he reached out, brushing a stray tear from my cheek with the lightest touch. "You okay?" he whispered. I nodded. "Yeah, just overwhelmed. In a good way." He hesitated, just a second, then pulled me into a gentle, careful hug. My breath caught. My heart stuttered. His warmth wrapped around me, steady and grounding. "We made a good team," he said quietly near my ear. I swallowed, my fingers gripping his coat lightly. "Yeah, we did." He pulled back enough to look at me, his eyes searching mine with a tenderness that made my chest feel too small. "And I'm not done being here," he said softly. "Not for you. Not for your mom." My breath trembled. I didn't know what we were yet, friends, something more, something undefined, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I didn't want him to let go. And he didn't.